Okay, so I'm just going to start and people can watch this whenever. My name is JJ Pionke and I'm the Applied Health Sciences Librarian at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I realize that this is probably not the best lighting ever in the face of the planet. I apologize for that. Yay, there's a person! um, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my work and why I want the scholarship and go from there. So, generally speaking, as the Applied Health Sciences librarian, I am the subject liaison for the Applied Health Sciences. So, well, what does that mean? So, my job is a tenure track position, and I have 50% librarianship, 30% research, and 20% service. My librarianship is where I'm doing things like spending money, ordering books and DVDs, and other materials. I just ordered a brain, an anatomical model. So the joke around the office right now is that JJ's brain has finally arrived, which is kind of hilarious. And I also do things like one-shot instruction sessions where a professor has me come into class and talk about something library or information related. So sometimes that means talking about, here's the library resources, and sometimes that means talking more about academic integrity or how do we know which information is legit, right? Especially in this age of false information. So I do some of that, and I'm going to do a quick sound check. Natalie, can you hear me okay? Hopefully, or whoever else is watching. I'm hoping you guys can hear me. Um, so, and then my research is, yes, okay, awesome. My research then is on disability in the library, and I myself am disabled. I'm having some physical disability issues right now from a pretty bad fall I had in October. But I also have PTSD, I have post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's been a whole journey at work, sometimes great, sometimes not so great. So, my journey really started at work anyway with the summer I got here. The bathrooms near me, near my office, were going down for renovation. And so, obviously, not a small person. So I asked 5 different people, where can I go to the bathroom? Partially, this is a pretty valid question because the building I'm in is from the 1920s, and people were smaller and thinner than they are today. And so there was a lot of like, oh, I think you can go to this one over here, or oh, I think you can go to that one over there. And it turned out that like none of those answers were really right. And so that really started the great bathroom hunt, as I, kind of lovingly called it, where I grabbed a map and I just walked the entire building in chunks looking for where can I go pee. Um, and I eventually found a good solution. Well, a good-ish solution. But that was like the beginning of my research right there. Like, why can't I find a bathroom? Why doesn't anybody know? And as I walked the library, I kept on finding more and more things that, you know, why why was it like this? Um, I found a bathroom that the glass pane in the door was reversed. So if you couldn't read backwards, you wouldn't know that it was a women's room. So things like that. Now, those are really about physical accessibility, and I spent really the first 2 years-ish really thinking a lot about disability and reading a lot of literature and talking about disability and accessibility, especially physical, because our building wasn't really very accessible, even though we are American with Disabilities Act compliant. And one of the arguments I've made over and over again is compliance means minimum. Why are we proud of that? So there was a lot of thinking, and actually one of the things that I did a lot of thinking about was, you know, how do I learn about all this stuff and what do I do? And so I'm going to stick this in the comments. So this is a piece that I wrote. Hopefully you guys are able to access that. There we go. So this is a piece I wrote. It's actually like the first journal article I wrote, but it took me a while to find a publisher for it, a journal for it, because it's a think piece, right? It's not, you know, research. And that's a freebie. That's that journal is a free on the internet journal, and anybody can read that. So if you're interested a little bit in like, what have I been thinking about for a while? That is sort of my big think piece that a lot of people have read and have talked about. So that's some of the thinking that I do. Research-wise, I had an article come out in Reference and User Services Quarterly, which is a big deal in my field. And that article was about a project where I interviewed people with different types of disabilities, and then basically cross-referenced their responses. Originally, it was supposed to be focus groups, but I couldn't generate enough people to do focus groups. So I switched methodologies to interviewing instead, and got some really great data, and, you know, just looked at, okay, what are the things in common? What are the things not in common? So I interviewed people who had vision impairment. I interviewed mobility impairment, PTSD, and autism. So I had, I think, 2 or 3 people in each group, and I interviewed them individually, and then just looked at their responses. So, and shockingly, there's almost no library literature that does that kind of work, that says, you know, okay, what are the similarities and differences of the needs of people with disabilities broadly defined? And so that also kind of started a journey. It was one of my first projects that I did here, and it took a while to get published because it was in a big name journal rather than in a smaller journal or a smaller piece. So since then, I've puttered around with various different types of think pieces or doing some literary analysis, particularly around my most recent piece that is going to be coming out soon. And again, short piece, quick look, but it's basically discussing how it's not okay that librarians and library employees in general, we unfortunately tend to give patrons nicknames, and those nicknames often are derogatory, especially if the person has a mental health issue. And, you know, I pulled out some social media examples from Facebook and talk about them a little bit and say, hey, not okay. So, you know, doing things like that is what I've been doing. My most recent big project, I got a campus research board grant for $25,000 to do 3 surveys and a scoping review of literature. And the surveys basically are looking at an arc of current education around disability and accessibility. So there's one survey for library students, library graduate students. There's one survey for library graduate deans. And then there's one survey for current library workers. And the idea is, okay, what do we think we're teaching our students? What do the students think they're learning? And then, most importantly, what do current working professionals actually need? Because I think there's probably like a really big disconnect between all of those. Of course, I won't know until I do the surveys, and hopefully they're launching on Monday. So it's been a journey, but one of the parts of and one of the reasons for getting survey or for getting a campus research board grant and why I really had to push for one was I have very little experience with statistics. I have some experience with survey design, and I've designed other surveys before, but most importantly, I other than, it's like find the average. Oh, I can do that. But anything else, no idea. So part of the money, half the money of my grant is going to the survey research lab to do my math for me. And it's a little bit more than that. I mean, they're also going to be coding my text entry questions, but they're doing bivariable analysis and stuff like that. And if you ask me what bivariable analysis is, I could not tell you. So one of the reasons I really want the scholarship is the main conference in my field, which is medical librarianship, because I'm applied health sciences librarian, is the Medical Library Association, and they have continuing education courses for 2 days before the conference actually starts. So one of the courses that I want to take is basically Stacks 101, because part of my problem is like, okay, I'm older, I'm more serious now, I'm more dedicated. Also, what are the things I need to know about statistics that I don't know? Because I know there's a lot that I don't know. And I also know that I'm not always going to be able to get a very large grant to hire other people to do my statistical analysis. So this is kind of a big issue for me, is that, okay, I need to really learn this skill, and I need to start on the bottom, right? Math is not an easy skill for me. It never has been. And so for me, learning math especially, I need to be in a classroom. I do not want to be in a 16-week classroom because I won't learn anything. But a day or a half day with focused attention from a teacher and fellow librarians who are also struggling through it would be very good for me, I think. The other, sort of the flip side of this coin is another CE I want to take is about basically qualitative analysis. So qualitative analysis is when we're doing things like interviews and focus groups and things like that. Quantitative analysis is going to be when we're doing numbers, right? So surveys is numbers, not always, but generally speaking. And then qualitative is interviews. So one of the things with my research that I particularly focus on or think about is what's the narrative, right? What's the story we're telling about, the patrons who are coming to the library and have a mental health disability, or coworkers that have a disability of some kind. What are those stories, and what are the things that we're making up, and what are the things that are actually true? And I think more importantly is like, what goes into all of that, right? What goes into those experiences that we have in the library when you have PTSD, or when you have to wheel around in a wheelchair, things like that. So I went to the University of Michigan, where they taught process analysis and project management and things like that. And that article about that was focus groups to interviews, that's how I analyzed my data, is that I did basically a process analysis and comparison with the skills that I had learned at Michigan. But I know that that's not maybe the real way to do qualitative analysis. And so this other continuing education course before MLA starts focuses on, here's qualitative analysis, let's talk about it. Here's coding, here are the things that go into it. And again, it's meant to be just a 1 day. This is a broad introduction to teach me the things that I don't even have names for and don't really understand where to go for even more information. And again, being in a class with, people who are in the same boat, who want to do more of this work or who want to do this work to begin with, but how do we do it? No idea. So I have funding for the conference itself, but I don't have enough money, either in my wallet or in money from the university to register for the 2 classes and then extend my stay 2 days in the conference hotel. And I mean, usually a lot of people are like, don't stay in the conference hotel, it's so expensive. Well, when you're kind of disabled, you think about spoons and spoon theory. How much energy is it going to take if I have to take a bus, for 30 minutes just to get to the venue. So I stay in the conference hotel in part to hold on to my sanity, and in part because I need to be as efficient with my energy as I can. So yeah, as Natalie's pointing out, improve my understanding. Part of that is absolutely I want to improve my understanding, and part of that is I want to do a better job. I know, the work that I've done so far, that I've published so far, I know people are reading it. I know people are using it in their classrooms. I know people are using it, at work, to make arguments for let's make changes. And, so I feel this onus to do a better job, right? To be a better researcher, to do this stuff in the best way that I can, the stuff being scholarship and research and all that kind of stuff. Because I think there's a lot of room here for development in terms of a research agenda, which is, the academic in me talking. But more importantly, I want to use this material to really better develop services and buildings and the experience for people with disabilities, not just for our patrons. I mean, that they are the most important that we think about, but also for employees. Like, as an employee with a disability, or a library employee with a disability, one, there's more of us than people realize, right, working in libraries. But also, two, libraries seem to not have any idea of what to do with us when we come out of the closet with our disability. So part of the stuff I've been grappling with and thinking about these days is, what does that mean to be a library employee with a disability? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for the people I work with? What does it mean for patrons that I interact with? Especially in terms of, okay, when I'm having a really high anxiety day, or when I'm having a high pain day, and sometimes those are at the same time, how does that affect my behavior? So I think about all those things. And, taking the CEUs, or continuing education credits, I think will help me be better able to articulate and more rigorously articulate findings and research, so that, big name dean or big name library director can't necessarily throw out the ideas that a young librarian has about accessibility or disability, or making the library more accessible for employees and for patrons, because here's this research, right, that says this is an issue and let's do something about it. So those are the kind of things I think about. In terms just of education, like, I know I have gaps. I rigorously avoided math classes as much as humanly possible in grad school, because I knew I wasn't good at it. One of my therapists believes that I probably actually have a math disability of some kind, a learning disability around math, which wouldn't be maybe too far from the truth. It's just not the way I think. But being able to do some basic statistical analysis would be very good for me, I think, and probably frustrating. So, but hey, we gotta learn, we gotta try, right? So yeah, my research is about disability in the library, and this, I want the scholarship to help me be better at it, and be a better researcher so that I can, help libraries become better, accessible, more inclusive places that are welcoming to everyone. I firmly believe in usability and user experience, especially user-centered design and universal design, where, our libraries and our services should be accessible from cradle to grave. And, it's problematic when they're not. So, and, of course, then there's all the intersection of like color, race, sexuality, gender, all that kind of stuff. Throw in disability, and there's lots of stuff going on there, right? How do we interact with all that? So, those are all questions I'm thinking about for the future. But yeah, so that's my spiel. Please vote for me, because I'd really like to take these continuing education opportunities. And yeah, are there any questions? It seems like there are two of you. So I'm happy to answer questions. I'm also happy to, yeah, dyscalculia. I totally get that. I've often wondered a little bit if that's something that I have. But yeah, so I will put in another link. I was trying to be prepared for this little discussion. I will put in another link. This is a project I did. I got a different grant a couple of years ago called the Carnegie Whitney Grant, and from the American Library Association. And basically, I got a grant to hire a grad student to create disability library guides. So we created, I think, about 25 library guides on different disabilities. So there's a library guide on PTSD, there's a library guide on autism, there's a library guide on mobility impairment, things like that. So the guides are kind of awesome, or at least I think they are, and please check them out. Haley, sorry. I did a research project that revolved around asking people with different disabilities how they experienced the library, and one group was autism. And then I also had PTSD, visual impairment, and mobility impairment. And then I did a cross analysis of what they said, like what were their experiences in the library. I've done a lot of other work with people with autism in terms of, I was part of a research team out of Eastern Illinois University. We're still writing up our results from that little project. And then I also attend the Targeting Autism Conference here in Illinois. And that happens once a year, twice a year, depends on the funding. And that's actually a great conference because it talks about how to work with people with autism. And there's often a lot of the speakers are people with autism. So we get a good bird's eye view into what is their experience, what are all the ways that autism looks. So hopefully that answers your question, Haley. And any other questions? If not, that's okay. Feel free to leave a comment if you're watching this recording later on, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Please vote for me, and I hope you have a lovely weekend. Thank you.